and welcome back to the Unfiltered Political Lens. Tonight, we're diving into one of the most uncomfortable conversations in modern America: the slow erosion of trust between the American people and the leaders who claim to represent them. This is not a comfortable topic, and it's not meant to be, because sometimes the truth isn't convenient. Across the country, millions of Americans, regardless of party, race, class, or background, are asking the same question: are our leaders truly working for us, or are they working to preserve a system that benefits themselves? That question doesn't come from paranoia, it comes from lived experience. It comes from watching promises made every election season and broken every year after. It comes from seeing billion-dollar bailouts for corporations while families are told to budget harder. It comes from watching the rules seem to apply differently depending on your last name, your bank account, or your political connection. For decades, Americans were taught to believe that if you worked hard, followed the law, and paid your taxes and did your part, the system would work for you. But for many people today, that belief feels like a broken promise. People are working longer hours and somehow falling further behind. Rent is higher, groceries cost more, and the gas prices hit families before they even make it to work. Healthcare feels like a luxury, and education creates lifelong debt. Retirement feels like a fantasy. Yet, while everyday Americans are told to be patient, politicians somehow continue to get richer. Inside trading allegations surface, lobbyists write legislation, corporate donors shape the public policy, and the average citizen is expected to believe this is normal. This is where the real frustration begins, not just in hardship, but in hypocrisy. We are told that the government is protecting democracy while the basic transparency disappears. Major policies are passed or buried inside thousand-page bills that most lawmakers haven't even fully read. Intelligence agencies expand surveillance programs in the name of national security, and emergency powers introduced during crises somehow become permanent features of our government. Every generation is told this is temporary, this is for your safety. But history teaches us something different. Governments rarely surrender power once they gain it. Temporary restrictions have a strange habit of becoming permanent systems. Surveillance justified by fear becomes normalized, and our freedoms surrendered during emergencies become difficult to reclaim once the emergency passes. Americans have seen this pattern before. After national tragedies, fears become the fastest path to expanded authority. Whether it's terrorism, public health emergencies, economic crashes, or social unrest, the formula is familiar. Crises creates fear, and fear creates compliance, and compliance creates power, and the fear works. Fear makes people trade privacy for protection. Fear makes people tolerate censorship for the promise of stability. And fear makes citizens stop asking difficult questions because the questions itself become suspicious. But freedom was never designed to be convenient. The Constitution was written with the assumptions that our power must be limited because power left unchecked always seeks more power. The founders did not fear ordinary citizens, they feared the concentrated authority. That is why free speech matters, even offensive speech. That is why privacy matters, even when people say they have nothing to hide. That is why due process matters, even when emotions run high. Because rights are not tested when the protected popular people, rights are tested when the protected unpopular ones. And today, many Americans feel those protections are weakening. Look at censorship battles across media and technology. Entire conversations are shaped by the corporations and the institutions deciding what can be amplified and what can be buried. People are deplatformed, labeled dismissed, or economically punished, not always for being wrong, but sometimes simply for just challenging dominant narratives. And this isn't about defending every opinion, it's about recognizing the dangers when truth becomes something managed by gatekeepers instead of debated openly by citizens. A free society does not require agreement, it requires the freedom to disagree. But the division itself has become one of the most powerful tools of control. Americans are constantly pushed to see each other as enemies: left versus right, urban versus rural, race versus race, generation versus generation, and neighbor versus neighbor, because divided people are easier to govern. When the citizens are fighting each other, they stop looking upward at the institutions, consolidating the power above them. If your energy is spent hating your fellow American, you are less likely to notice who benefits from that hatred. Political outrage has become an industry. Media profits from the fear, and social media profits from anger. The campaigns profit from division, and the people left emotionally exhausted are the citizens themselves. This truth is corruption does not wear only one party's colors. It exists wherever accountability disappears. It exists in politicians who campaign as outsiders and govern like insiders. It exists in corporate influence disguised as policy expertise. It exists in bureaucracies so massive that no one seems responsible when the failure happens. This is not just a Republican problem. It is not just a Democrat problem. It is a power problem. And perhaps the most dangerous part is how normal is it all has it become. People are becoming numb. Scandals that would have ended political careers decades ago now disappear in 48 hours because the next outrage arrives before accountability ever does. Corruption fatigue has set in. People are tired, they are overwhelmed, they are distracted. And that exhaustion is very powerful because a tired population is easier to control than an engaged one. If people feel nothing can change, they stop trying. If they believe every institution is compromised, they withdraw instead of organizing. Hopelessness becomes political strategy. That is why cynicism can be just as dangerous as blind trust. If citizens stop believing accountability is possible, corruption wins by default. But let's talk about something even deeper: the quiet loss of freedom that doesn't look dramatic. Most people imagine tyranny as something obvious: soldiers in streets, dramatic crackdowns, visible oppression. But real freedom often disappears quietly. It disappears when the financial systems can be weaponized. It disappears when speech becomes professionally dangerous. It disappears when citizens are trained to self censor because silence feels safer than honesty. It disappears when the law is applied selectively. And it disappears when ordinary people accept permanent expectations to normal rights because they are told the danger requires it. And perhaps most dangerously, it disappears when people begin to believe that freedom is selfish and control is compassion. That mindset changes everything. Because once liberty is framed as irresponsible, the control becomes moral. And once control becomes moral, the resistance become villainized. This is where Americans must be careful, because no nation loses freedom overnight. It happens slowly, one policy, one justification, and one silence at a time. Meanwhile, the economic pressure keeps building. People sense instability is not just politically, but financially. They see inflation rising faster than the wages. They see the Federal Reserve making decisions that shape mortgages, savings, and retirement accounts most people barely understand. They hear words like soft landing while feeling a hard reality. They are told that the economy is strong while skipping doctor visits and delaying their bills. There is a difference between economic statistics and economic truth. The people know the difference because they live it. And when trust in economic leadership collapses, trust in government follows. Then there is a foreign policy. Americans are constantly asked to support international involvement in the name of freedom, security, or stability. But after decades of war, many citizens are asking whether the cost was matched the promise. Families sent sons and daughters overseas. Veterans returned carrying visible and invisible wounds. And trillions were spent, entire regions destabilized, and people still ask safer for whom? That question does matter because the patriotism should not mean blind obedience. It should mean loyalty to the principles, not the permanent trust in the institution. Questioning the leadership is not anti American. It is one of the most American things a person can do. A republic depends on informed skepticism. Blind faith belongs to monarchies, not constitutional government. Yet too often criticism is treated like a betrayal. That mindset is dangerous because government should fear losing the trust of the people, not the other way around. The people are supposed to be sovereign. That word matters. Sovereign or sovereignty. It means the authority begins with the citizen, not the institution. But many Americans no longer feel sovereign. They feel managed. They feel monitored, and they feel economically trapped and politically unheard. And when citizens feel powerless for too long, two things happen: apathy or extremism. Both are destructive. Apathy allows corruption to continue quietly, and extremism creates chaos that often justifies even more control. The path is neither to surrender nor destruction. It is civic vigilance. It is local involvement, and it is informed participation. It is asking who benefits and who pays and who gains power every time a new policy is introduced. It is remembering that freedom is not maintained by symbols alone. Flags matter, national pride matters, but symbolism without accountability becomes a performance. Real patriotism demands responsibility. It demands truth even when truth is uncomfortable. It demands courage, especially when silence is easier. And it demands citizens who understand that liberty is inherited only if it is defended. No generation gets freedom permanently, and every generation decides whether to protect it or to trade it away. The challenge facing America is not whether corruption exists. Corruption has always existed. The challenge is whether enough people still care enough to confront it. Will citizens remain distracted? Will they remain divided? Will they keep outsourcing responsibilities to institutions they no longer trust? Or will they remember that the strength of this country has never supposed to come from government alone? It was supposed to come from the people themselves. That answer will shape the future more than any election would, because the leaders reflect what citizens tolerate. If dishonesty is rewarded, it will grow. If accountability is demanded, systems change. And if freedom is treated as notable or negotiable, it disappears. And if truth becomes optional, the power becomes permanent. America stands at a crossroads, not because collapse is guaranteed, but because complacency is dangerous. The future is still unwritten, but it will not be decided by speeches alone. It will be decided by whether ordinary people remain willing to think critically and speak honestly and refuse to surrender what previous generations fought to preserve. Freedom is not self sustaining. Survives only when citizens defend it, not perfectly, not loudly every day, but consistently, because the silence is easy. Convenience is tempting, and comfort can be expensive when it costs your liberty. The real question is not whether America faces a crisis. The real question is whether Americans still remember what freedom requires. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Unfiltered Political Lens. Like, share, and subscribe if you believe truth should never be filtered. Stay informed, stay questioning, and stay awake. And we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you. Peace.